A lot of us tend to think that we're stuck or unmotivated because we don't know what steps to take to improve our lives. But the reality is, deep down, you probably already know what you need to do to move forward. There's a task or responsibility that's been sitting in the back of your mind, something you've been avoiding like it's the plague. The problem isn't a lack of knowledge or even a lack of clarity. The problem is that you just can't seem to muster the willpower to start. This is a common issue. Every single day, we sit down with the intention of getting something done, and we're immediately hit with a wall of resistance. You know what I'm talking about, that feeling that stops you from doing what you should do. It feels almost unfair because this resistance usually only shows up when you're trying to do something that would actually be beneficial for you. It's like your mind is actively trying to sabotage your progress. So why does it seem like life is set up this way? Why is it so hard to do the things that will actually make us better? Think about the times when you've tried to push through that resistance by sheer force of will. You might have thought, if only I could be motivated enough, everything would be easier. But motivation is tricky. Wouldn't life be so much simpler if you naturally enjoyed tackling difficult tasks? If writing that essay, working on a creative project, or even doing your taxes was something you looked forward to? We've all wished we could be the kind of person who genuinely enjoys doing things that are good for us. The reality, however, is that our brains don't work like that. There are tons of self-help strategies out there that suggest things like setting a timer for 5 minutes or thinking more positively about your work. While these tricks might give you a short burst of energy or focus, they usually fizzle out quickly. They're like band-aids on a deeper problem. What you need is something that will actually get you to do the work consistently. Here's the truth. The most powerful solution is something most people overlook: boredom. It might sound strange, but boredom is both the problem and the solution. The reason you don't want to do the task in front of you is because it feels boring. Your brain craves stimulation, and it knows there are so many other things, like scrolling through social media, watching TV, or playing games, that are much more entertaining. This is why we always have an escape route when it comes to our work. When you sit down to start, your mind immediately starts thinking of other things you could be doing instead. Why sit down and write an essay when you could check Instagram? Why tackle that big project when there's a new video on YouTube calling your name? But here's the key. Your brain doesn't actually see things in terms of absolute entertainment value. It works by comparison. Everything is relative. For example, when you spend a bright day outside and then walk into a dimly lit room, that room feels almost pitch black, even though it's just normal lighting. Your brain is comparing the brightness of the outdoors to the dimness inside. The same thing happens with tasks. When you compare a boring task to something entertaining like social media, the boring task feels unbearable. A great way to understand this is through a fascinating study that was published in 2014. In this study, a group of undergraduate students were placed in an empty room with nothing to do except sit and think. The only other option they had was to press a button that would deliver a small electric shock. You might expect that no one would choose to shock themselves, but surprisingly, 67% of the men and 25% of the women did. Some even shocked themselves multiple times. Why? Because they were so bored that even a mild electric shock seemed like a better option. This study highlights something fundamental about human nature. We dislike boredom so much that we will go to great lengths to avoid it. This is why solitary confinement is considered such a harsh form of punishment. Being alone with nothing to do is one of the most mentally taxing experiences a person can go through. So, how can we use this understanding to our advantage? If you were placed in a room with nothing to do but one task, you would eventually do that task, simply because your brain would be so desperate for stimulation. The idea is that when you take away all other options, the one task you need to do starts to seem like the most interesting thing in the world. I've experienced this firsthand. Some of the most productive times in my life were when I had almost nothing to distract me. I once lived in a small, nearly empty apartment with no luxuries, very little money, and only one thing to focus on: editing videos for my clients. At the time, I didn't have a proper chair, so I sat on an upside-down laundry hamper, and there was little to do except work. But this forced simplicity made me incredibly productive because my brain had no other choice but to engage with the work in front of me. Even though I was broke and didn't have many distractions, I found myself being more creative, more motivated, and surprisingly fulfilled. That's because the lack of options pushed me to dive deeper into my work. The less you have to distract you, the more your brain will make your work feel interesting and rewarding. Now that you understand the power of boredom, you can use it to your advantage. The first step is to eliminate the distractions that usually pull your attention away. If you have a task you need to focus on, turn off your phone, remove any unnecessary gadgets from your workspace, and minimize your ability to do anything other than the work at hand. If you have a gaming system, put it away. If you find yourself constantly checking the internet, consider using software that blocks distracting websites. The idea is to create an environment where your only option is to work on the task in front of you. At first, it might feel uncomfortable, but soon enough, your brain will start to adapt. Without other options, the work you're avoiding will start to feel more engaging. This isn't about depriving yourself of enjoyment. It's about training your brain to find value in the things that matter most. Over time, you'll find that the tasks you once dreaded become more interesting, simply because you've stripped away the distractions that make them seem boring in comparison. This strategy might sound simple, but it's incredibly effective. It's not about willpower or motivation, which can be fleeting and unreliable. It's about leveraging your brain's natural tendencies and using boredom to push you toward productivity. Once you take away the distractions and leave yourself with only one option, you'll be amazed at how quickly you start to get things done. By constructing an environment that encourages focus and eliminating the backdoors that lead to procrastination, you're not only increasing your productivity, but also reshaping the way you think about work. The less cluttered your life becomes, the more room you'll have to appreciate the challenge and satisfaction that comes with getting things done. This approach isn't just a short-term fix. It's a powerful mindset shift that can transform the way you approach your tasks, helping you find fulfillment in even the most challenging responsibilities. Anyway, thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe. Love you guys.